Now we're going to look at another portion of the Affordable Care Act, namely the ones in which the government is paying out money, which are the subsidies and the Medicaid expansion. And the money is really going to be going out to two main groups: people and small companies. Let's look at the people first, and these are mainly the people who cannot afford insurance, the poor people. So let's start by looking at a scale of wealth. And so on this scale, as we increase, you have more money. So the way it stands right now is people who live below the federal poverty level, they're going to be on Medicaid. So their insurance is taken care of, their health care. Now the people who can afford insurance, these people are already going to have insurance, either through their employer or they buy their own private insurance. So the question is, what about these people here in the middle? The ones that are too rich to get Medicaid, yet too poor to buy their own insurance. These people are current uninsured. So how do we address these? Well, in two ways. The first thing is the expansion of Medicaid. So now Medicaid will be extended to people who are 133% of the federal poverty level. So Medicaid has expanded further. Now, this poses an interesting issue. Medicaid is traditionally paid for by the states, and the states are already hurting economically, so they probably cannot pay for this extra amount. And so what the federal government said is, don't worry about it. We'll help you with this, but they added another stipulation. They said, if you do not, and the federal government actually helps with this amount too, but the states do have to chip in as well. But what the federal government says, if you do not expand Medicaid, we will not help you out with any of it. So you will get no funds for Medicaid, no federal funds for Medicaid, if you do not expand Medicaid. Now this was another piece that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, nope, you know what, you cannot force Medicaid expansion upon the states, so the states will still get this amount of money, and they will get this extra part paid for by courtesy of the U.S. government. So the government is going to help pay for this. Initially it's going to pay all of it, and it's gradually going to dial this back down. 2020, I think it's going to be like 90% of it. But for 2014, 2016, it's going to pick up the whole tab. Now, most states then said, you know what, since you're paying for it, we may as well expand Medicaid because we'll take the money. Now, some states, mostly Republican states, have decided not to expand Medicaid, and they're refusing this money, whether that's on principle or on the fact that they think that in the future they know they're going to be responsible for this money. They won't have the money to do so, but they are not expanding Medicaid. Now, what happens to these people over here, the ones who are not in the Medicaid, not falling under the Medicaid expansion, and yet can't afford insurance? Well, they also get a government subsidy. And this subsidy that they get depends on how much they can pay. So the poorer they are, the less they can afford, the more subsidy they get. And the more they can afford, the less subsidy that they get. And another group of people who will be getting some subsidies are the elder people who have prescriptions. So if you remember the donut hole that we talked about in the Medicaid video, the Medicare video, what happened was people who are on Medicare who had prescriptions less than $2,000, that was paid for, and above $6,000, that was also paid for. But in the middle, between $2,000 and $6,000, the seniors had to pay. So that's actually quite a bit of money, especially if you're on a fixed income. So what the Affordable Care Act aims to do is to decrease this donut hole, initially picking up half of this tab with the goal of, by 2020, of closing it completely, meaning all of it would be paid for. So it'll all be paid for by 2020. So the Affordable Care Act would also aim to close the prescription donut hole. And the last group that would be getting money from the Affordable Care Act would be small businesses. If they chose to buy insurance for their employees, so these are companies with less than 50 employees, then the government would give them subsidies in the form of tax credits. So in this video, we looked at some of the ways that the government would be spending money in the Affordable Care Act. They'd be giving it to people, they'd be giving it to small businesses, maybe through the expansion of Medicaid, as well as subsidies for people who are too poor to buy insurance, yet too rich to qualify for Medicaid. And they'd also be closing the donut hole. So there's a lot of money that's being paid out. Later on, we'll look at how they're going to be bringing money in. Okay, now we'll look at the healthcare exchanges in the next video.